All right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining me. I'm excited to be back for part 4 of the Stay Calm and Well series, this time to talk about quarantine 15. And if you are not familiar with that term, it is a hashtag that is used to describe the weight gain that some have experienced during the pandemic. And I do want to acknowledge right off the bat that quarantine 15 is not universal. In fact, for some, the pandemic provided opportunities to establish new healthy habits. Perhaps you had the opportunity to use what was your commute time to do more exercise or to cook more meals at home. And I actually recall a kind of a funny conversation between two colleagues of mine back in December, where one was describing how she had actually lost 26 pounds during the pandemic because all of the home cooking she was doing. And the other jokingly said, well, I think I found the 26 pounds you lost because she had took up baking as a hobby during the pandemic. And so whoever you happen to relate to in that scenario, you are certainly not alone. The Pandemic Stress in America survey from the American Psychological Association found that about 2/3 of adults gained weight during the pandemic, and then the other third didn't. But I think interestingly, there was a study that came out from the Journal of the American Medical Association just last week that found that on average, the average American adult did gain 1.5 pounds between February and June of last year, which is fairly significant. That's over 6 months' time, that's almost 10 pounds. Over a year, that's 20. So that's why we're going to talk about that today. And I'm glad you're joining us, whether you have some weight that you need to lose or you're just looking to get back on track with some healthy eating habits. We're going to go ahead and dive right in by first reviewing some of the key points from last week. You didn't have a chance to listen to the session Shannon presented last week on pandemic paralysis. I highly recommend you go back and listen to the recording. It was fantastic. And I'm going to try today to bring some of her points to life. So as we talk about approaching quarantine 15, I'm going to talk about how you can use some of her key points and apply them specifically to this topic. So Shannon talked about the importance of solution-focused thinking, focusing on solutions over problems, what you can do versus what you can't. She talked about chunking your time, and today we'll talk a little bit about chunking goals. She talked about dealing with emotions. That'll come into play today as we talk about identifying perhaps whether there are certain emotions like boredom or stress that lead us to eat when we're not truly hungry. And then she talked about finding your purpose and setting a personal goal for the week. Today, I'm going to talk about whether or why to worry about quarantine 15, some steps you can take to overcome pandemic paralysis, to start shedding quarantine 15, and then I'll share some resources that you can use to make healthy eating easier. And I'm going to start this session with a poll. There are 2 options here. Is quarantine 15 a matter of concern? And I'm going to give you a chance to weigh in. You can say yes, it is, or no, you don't think it's a big deal. And the reason that I launched this poll, of course, I think it's worth talking about. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this session today. But to give you a little background, when the hashtag first came out, it was a little bit controversial, and it did receive some backlash as some mental health professionals recognized or acknowledged that the pandemic was an extraordinarily stressful time, and they kind of spoke up and said, let's not mess with coping strategies. If people are able to find a coping strategy, that's generally a good thing. And a preoccupation with dieting is or body image is not healthy. And so as a dietitian, I would definitely agree that a preoccupation with dieting and body image is not a good thing. And I could probably do a whole session just on that. But I do think this topic is worth discussing, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So I think we can go ahead and close that poll. I actually don't. Yep, there we go. So about 81% of you agree that, yes, it worries me, and about 20% don't think it's a big deal. I'm going to argue that it is worth addressing for a few reasons. First of all, that the foods that we do consume in stressful times tend to be high in calories and low in nutritional value. When you're feeling stressed out, you typically don't, sit on the couch and just snack on baby carrots or go and make yourself a salad, right? The foods we turn to in times of stress, if we're using that eating as a coping mechanism, tend to be high carbohydrate, things like chips or cookies or alcohol, things that provide comfort, but really don't have a lot of nutritional value. And we know that what we eat can help or hinder our immune function. So we need foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals, things like fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean protein to support our immune systems and to prevent chronic disease. We know that there is a very strong association between diet and chronic disease, and excess weight and chronic disease. So in fact, in some, within the last month or so, I've seen more and more research coming out on the association specifically between obesity and COVID-19, and how in some states, obesity has been one of the prioritization factors in terms of who is getting the vaccine. So here in Ohio, it's been that the rollout has been determined primarily on age. But there is some research suggesting that after advanced age, obesity is the second greatest predictor of whether someone will get severely sick if they do sick or even die if they get the coronavirus. So those are just a few reasons why I think this is worth discussing today. And so I do want to provide you with some strategies to get started if you're in a place where you're ready to make some changes, establish some new healthy habits. First of which would be to adopt a positive perspective. So rather than just giving into a weight gain during the pandemic as inevitable, you might shift your thinking to consider how the pandemic could be an opportunity to change your routine and maybe establish some new healthy habits. Shannon talked last week about considering what is in your control, what in your environment are you able to control? And maybe there are opportunities in your own routine or your home or work environment where you can take control. One way you could do that would be to maybe if you are still working from home, think about where you're doing your work and where you're eating, maybe trying to set times to go down to the kitchen for meals or snacks rather than, passing through multiple times where you could be tempted to graze or overeat. You can also set that environment up by making sure that there are healthy snacks that are easily accessible, ready to grab, that are convenient, that are attractive, like maybe having fruit out on the counter and putting your sugary snacks or your junk food out of sight, away in the pantry or the cabinets, or even keeping it out of the house altogether. Another thing you could do would be to start small. Again, this comes back to starting with what you can do. And so maybe weight loss would be an ultimate goal, but what can you do today? Or what could you do this week to start working toward that goal. Maybe it's as simple as finding a new recipe to try. I'll provide some resources for that in just a moment. Maybe it's starting to look at nutrition labels. I know the Healthy Habits Challenge for March focused on looking at the sugar content on labels. And even as a dietitian, I was surprised by the sugar content in some of the foods I had in my house. So that could be a place to start. Maybe it's starting to keep a food diary. And I don't necessarily mean tracking your calories. It could be, writing down where and when and how you feel when you eat, like starting to name those emotions to find out whether you're eating because you're truly hungry, or perhaps you're eating out of boredom or stress. You can also start to identify what we as in the nutrition world call our internal versus external cues. So our internal cues are our body's cues for hunger and fullness that lead us to eat when we're hungry and stop when we're full. But there are many, many things in our environment that may lead us to eat. Those are called external cues, regardless of whether or not we're hungry. And some of those are in our control and some of those aren't. So for some, it could be habitual. It could be time of day or a certain place, or just seeing something appetizing. So starting to identify those cues, where, when, and how you're feeling when you're eating can help you identify maybe some alternate opportunities to take on a stress coping strategy that doesn't involve food, or maybe an opportunity to modify your environment so that you're not triggered or cued to eat if you're not truly hungry. The final thing I'll mention, maybe a step you could take today or this week is starting to plan ahead. If you're not already a meal planner, this is something that can, it takes some effort. It takes some time and effort up front, but it can have a big payoff. Planning your meals, shopping according to your meal plan, sticking to that list can help you find success long term. For some, it's making a meal plan and a list and going to the grocery store and sticking to that list. For others, it may be doing online shopping. That can be a strategy to avoid the temptation of impulse buys in the grocery store. But planning ahead can be a way to set your home environment up for your healthy eating success. And along with that, keeping a well-stocked pantry, making sure you have some staple items on hand so that you could throw a healthy meal together in a pinch if your plans go astray, or if you need to do that. So one of the strategies I mentioned, a small step you could take today or this week, is finding a new recipe that features fruits and vegetables. And there are a lot of great resources out there, of course, through the university, through our Virgin Pulse app. We have access to Zapongo, where you can find a lot of recipes there. I'll also highlight Celebrate Your Plate, which is an initiative of the Ohio SNAP Ed program. It helps, there's lots of great recipes on there that feature easy and cost-effective recipes you could make on a budget that feature fruits and vegetables and taste good. And actually, this little carrot, the top of the carrot, is the state of Ohio, which is kind of cute. Food Hero is a very similar website, but it comes from our friends at another OSU, Oregon State University. And then My Plate also has some great recipes if you're just looking to try something new. An alternative to trying a new recipe could be finding a new way to prepare fruits or veggies. There's something about learning something new, doing something new or different that just lights up different pathways in our brain and can really help you get out of a rut if you're feeling stuck. So trying something new could be a way to, find a little bit of motivation and establish a new healthy habit. I've been experimenting a lot this past year with an air fryer and with an Instant Pot. So those are a couple of appliances. And I do just want to highlight here a series of videos that I have been able to create with a colleague of mine in Franklin County on growing, harvesting, and cooking fresh, locally grown veggies using different cooking methods. So we have 4 videos in this series so far. They are all available on our OSU Extension Franklin County YouTube channel. They're also available on the Growing Franklin blog. So if you want to learn more about air frying or dehydrating, you're welcome to check those out or contact me with additional questions. But I just want to suggest maybe trying something new as a simple first step you could take. If you're ready to go a little bit farther than perhaps just trying a new recipe, there are a lot of great resources and tools out there to help you wherever you may be in your journey. So if you're ready to maybe start tracking your food intake, you could use something like the MyFitnessPal app or website, which again syncs with the Virgin Pulse app so that you can earn points in doing that. MyPlate also has an app you can use if you're wanting to track your intake. Within OSU, we have access to some amazing health coaches. You could reach out and get connected with the health coaching team to work with them either individually or in a group setting if you're ready to maybe set some bigger goals and work towards those goals and just get some additional support and advice. Some of them are registered dietitians, but you could also reach out to your physician, your primary care provider for a recommendation for a dietitian if you're wanting to get connected with somebody that way. Or you might seek out an accountability group, something like a Weight Watchers group or a Facebook group where people are sharing recipes and strategies and tips with each other. So in summary today, what I want to encourage you to do this week, if you're ready to make take some small steps to establish healthy eating habits, maybe start to shed your quarantine 15, is to adopt a positive perspective so you can overcome your pandemic paralysis and approach quarantine 15. Chunk your goals and celebrate small achievements, like finding and trying new recipes. Identify your cues and modify your environment to set yourself up for success, and then seek out additional support as you're ready. Just a reminder here to please complete the survey when it's sent out and to consider joining us next week when Patrice will talk about gardening as a self-care practice. And I do also want to, first of all, share my contact information. I'm going to stay on here to answer questions, but you're also welcome to reach out to me directly if you have questions for the dietitian, and also give a plug for our OSU Extension Live Healthy, Live Well blog. Shannon mentioned this last week, but I do want to share 3 specific articles that may be of interest. There's one I recently wrote on quarantine 15. There's one Shannon wrote earlier this year on pandemic paralysis. And then there's one that I wrote, I think in December, on cooking fatigue. So there's some additional tips there. And you're welcome to peruse our blog. We post twice a week on various topics. So I'll go ahead and drop those in the chat now if you want to check any of those out. And I'm happy to take questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. If anyone has any questions, please throw them in the Q&A. We definitely have some time to answer them, but we've got a couple in here. So the first one is, how can you modify your environment when your family aren't on board with keeping unhealthy foods out of the house?
Oh, that's a really tough one. Yeah, I would work with, that's a really great one to discuss with a health coach. I would think just to talk more about your personal environment and really identify what you might have control over and what not. You're right. It's hard. It's hard when you're trying to make changes for the better, and your family or your roommates or whoever just aren't supportive. I think just trying to be an advocate for yourself to the degree that you're able, and just asking people to support you, even though it may be like an inconvenience for them, is worth doing. But I can really empathize with that because it's tough.
Okay. Next question is, what are your thoughts on Noom? It seems to be popular right now.
I have to be honest, I am not familiar with Noom. So I'd have to look into that a little bit.
Okay, we have kind of a question and then a follow-up in the Q&A. I have previously used MyFitnessPal, specifically restricting daily calorie intake. Do you recommend this? And then the follow-up is, what are your thoughts on raisins and nut snacking?
Okay. So MyFitnessPal, first of all, that is a drawback for sure. I would say that in my experience, specifically when I used to work doing dietary counseling, before I started my career with Ohio State. That was something I learned. MyFitnessPal doesn't have a lower limit. Like, it will allow you to go as low as you want to go. And that can actually be dangerous, or counterproductive when you get to a point. So I would again encourage you to work with a dietitian or a health coach to set a reasonable goal for yourself. Usually, losing about if you're wanting to lose weight, losing about 1 pound a week is pretty reasonable. But you don't want to set your calorie goal so low, like trying to fast track that weight loss, that you can actually slow your metabolism to a point where weight loss can become stagnant because you're not providing your body with enough energy. And you have to remind me of the second question there.
Do you recommend nut and raisin snacking?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, those are pretty healthy snacks. You think about, your fruits, your vegetables, your lean proteins, including nuts. Those are all going to be really wonderful snacks.
All right, next question is, I'm thinking about joining Weight Watchers because I feel like I need some structure provided around my eating habits, but I really dislike counting points or calories on a daily basis. Do you recommend any other alternatives?
That's a tricky one too. And I understand, kind of the trade-off between wanting the accountability, but not wanting to track it. It kind of sounds like, you just may not be ready to commit to counting calories or tracking right now. And that's okay. Maybe seek out, work with, try to find accountability in another way. Like, are there other accountability groups or, a group health coaching group you could join to gain some other strategies aside from tracking if you're not ready to do so. Although I will say that if you're really serious about wanting to lose weight, that does tend to be kind of a gold standard evidence-based approach. So when you're ready, once you work yourself up to that point, I would recommend using an app or some other form of tracking, if you're setting a weight loss goal for yourself.
Just a couple of comments on this question as well. It seems like we've got a few Weight Watchers advocates in the chat, but just one says, I'm actually on Weight Watchers right now, and they have 3 different point counting plans. The purple plan has a list of 0-point foods, and it's very extensive. So if you eat from these foods, the only thing you have to track is what's not on the list. So it seems like it's pretty user-friendly compared to where it used to be. The next question is, I know you should eat snacks in between meals, but how many hours in between meals and snack? I ate a meal replacement smoothie at 8 a.m. What time am I allowed to eat my first snack?
First, I'll comment on that word allowed. I don't really like that word allowed, or when you start to set rules for yourself. You don't want to get too, you don't want to get too restrictive when you're eating. What I would encourage is really starting to pay attention to your cues, as I mentioned, and trying to identify when you're truly hungry and eating when you're hungry. So if you're hungry, a couple hours after your morning meal or snack, then it's time for another snack. If a few hours go by, I would say, in general, I would encourage you to fuel your body at least every few hours, every 3 to 4 hours. Small snacks spread out throughout the day, or larger meals if you like larger meals, but trying to keep your body fueled with healthy snacks or meals consistently through the day is what you do.
Next question is, what do you think of intermittent fasting?
I was waiting for this. I was anticipating this question today. So the research on intermittent fasting, what I've seen at least, shows that it's no more or less effective than tracking your calories in any other way. So intermittent fasting is attractive to some folks because you're setting limits on the hours in which you're able to eat, rather than making any other sort of food rules or restrictions, putting things off limits. So it is an attractive strategy to some. I would recommend consulting with your physician before you start intermittent fasting if you're interested in that, because it is not indicated for some people, specifically if you have a history of low blood sugar, or you are at risk for that. So it could be an effective strategy, but definitely talk to a doctor before getting started with that.
Great. Along the same lines, what are your thoughts on following a ketogenic diet?
I personally am not a fan of most diets, keto, other trendy diets, paleo from a few years ago and so forth, just because they're so restrictive and I don't think they're sustainable over time. So I would be a bigger advocate for generating healthy habits that you can stick to over the long haul, versus trying to get on board with a specific diet like keto. That being said, if you're really convinced that, that's the one for you, please consult with a physician or a dietitian before getting started, just to make sure that you're doing more benefit to your body than potential harm.
Another one, kind of on the same lines. My son's physician recommended the Mediterranean diet for him. Is that a quality lifestyle change that is easy to maintain once over the learning curve? Any cautions or potential pitfalls with that one? We seem to think it's pretty labor intensive at this point.
The Mediterranean diet is one that's been around for a long time, and it does have quite a bit of research to back it up. So the Mediterranean one is one that I would stand behind. It could at times feel a little restrictive, but it does have some proven health benefits, especially if you're trying to prevent heart disease and promote brain health and so forth.
Great. Couple more. One person asks, how much oil is too much when cooking?
So that's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head a specific oil limit to provide you with. We could get into the numbers and break down the percent of calories that would typically come from carbohydrates versus fats versus protein. I'm sorry, I don't have a definitive answer for you right off the cuff. I would say that using oil over butter is generally a healthy choice, using those plant unsaturated fats, those that tend to come from plant sources. But as we know, even our unsaturated fats do do have a lot of calories. So trying to, limit those so it's not the bulk of your diet is important.
Okay, two more. What is your opinion as using a whole food plant-based diet? Can it be healthy or is it too restrictive?
Plant-based eating, I do think is relatively sustainable, and meaning that it's something that you could make your lifestyle. It is a healthy habit that you could make and maintain over time. I would say as long as you're not becoming too narrow in your definition of plant-based, there are a lot of people who follow vegetarian and even vegan diets and are able to, sustain those over time, and they have a lot of wonderful health benefits. So no, I don't think that's too restrictive. I think it could provide you with many health benefits. Again, it's something that you would want to tell your doctor or a dietitian that you're planning on doing to make sure that you're not going to be at risk for any nutrient deficiencies. But I would, again, stand behind that one.
All right. The last question is, someone says that they'd like to make some healthy lifestyle changes to lower some of their numbers, such as A1C. Do you have any recommendations for foods that help with that?
Yeah, you know what? There's so much research to show that, if you are if you are overweight, losing even a moderate amount of weight, like maybe 5 to 10 pounds, can help with your blood sugar control. It can help with blood pressure. And so when we think about a nutrient dense eating your fruits and vegetables and your whole grains, your foods that are rich in fiber and other nutrients, your lean proteins, eating a healthy diet that contains nutritious foods from those basic food groups would help with blood sugar control, as well as some of those other risk factors for other chronic diseases.
Awesome. I think that wraps up the questions and should wrap up our webinar for the day. So really just want to say thank you to Jenny for giving us such a great presentation and all of you for joining us. So we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.